Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Blogcast with your hosts Will and Simon. We've got a really interesting project for you guys today. Hey Simon, how's it going?
Hey, Will, mate. I'm doing really well today, and this is quite an exciting project. It's something I got really excited about when I discovered it. It's basically a interest-bearing stablecoin backed by Ethereum and backed by Ethereum proof of stake issuance.
So it's a stable coin. We've got a lot of them. We had Luna, we've got Dai and Maker. And what makes this one so different? I think you mentioned interest rates.
Yeah, so this one earns a yield. So we should say it is Lybra Finance, Lybra Finance. And basically, it's similar to DAI in that it is an Ethereum-backed stablecoin. So not a fiat-backed stablecoin like USDC or USDT. It's backed by Ethereum collateral. And basically, how it works is when you deposit your Ethereum, it converts it into stETH, the Lido Finance interest-bearing ETH from the proof of stake chain, and you mint an eUSD, a stable coin from your Ethereum. So the stETH that it's converted to is earning yield via the ETH proof of stake. We've mentioned ETH proof of stake many times before. We've mentioned that is basically the risk-free yield for the crypto sphere, and that yield now from the Ethereum is then converted into eUSD and issued to eUSD holders. So basically what it is a stable coin that earns interest from the Ethereum proof of stake chain.
Hmm. That's pretty cool. Since Maker came out a couple of years ago, it's been great, and there's a lot of reasons to hold DAI or stables. One of them is to, I suppose, diversify your portfolio, or maybe during bear markets, you probably want to hold more USDC, more DAI, as opposed to things like Ethereum. And so, what makes this one interesting is that, let's say during bear market, so whenever I want to hold my stable coin, I can essentially pretty much have my cake and eat it. I'm holding a stable coin and I'm earning interest. But then my question is, could you tell us exactly where this interest comes from? Because let's say I go and I buy this and I exchange my UST for this stable token. Where is
You're going
this
to
coming
exchange your,
from?
your UST. You're going to exchange your UST for it, are you?
Well, I noticed that one of the promotions that they have is that you can actually take your UST and I think your USDC and some other stables, and they actually let you trade it for this interest-bearing one. But I'm wondering, where is the interest coming from? Like, that's it sounds like magic almost.
So we all know that Ethereum has the proof of stake chain and it issues out to ETH. People who stake the ETH earn more Ethereum for
Hmm.
staking on the Ethereum chain. So how this works is it converts that ETH yield from staked ETH into this US dollar stablecoin. So the interest comes from the Ethereum blockchain effectively. And so the reason why this would be really
I
interesting to
see.
people, as you mentioned, the reason it'd be really interesting to people who are just stablecoin holders is if you're holding a stablecoin, you can do a lot of DeFi things. You can go provide it to liquidity pools to try and earn the yield on it. You can lend it out. You can borrow it. There's all sorts of activities you can do to try and make yield on that stablecoin while it's in there doing nothing. The beauty of this one is that you can just convert your USDC into eUSD, the Libra stablecoin, and that's it. The coin itself starts earning yield because it's deriving that yield from the ETH proof of stake chain. So it's probably one of the simplest ways to do it. And if we remember back to good old UST and Luna, so the reason why UST was so popular was because you could earn that 20% yield just from
Hmm.
holding UST pretty much. Had to go put it into Anchor. But that yield for UST was being derived from effectively a Luna marketing budget. And so that could never
Hmm.
last indefinitely, whereas the yield for eUSD is coming from the Ethereum blockchain. And so that, I guess, will continue to go into the future. So it's a far more stable and secure yield over the long term.
Well, that makes it really interesting. I'm just looking at the total value locked in Maker, the protocol that makes DAI, and that's billions. That's billions, billions of dollars worth of Ethereum just sitting in a smart contract, not gaining any interest. And so what we're saying is that all of that money could essentially be doing two things. One, it could be securing Ethereum if staked through Lybra, but two, it could be gaining interest for all of that DAI that has been created. If there's a couple of billion dollars staked in Maker's protocol, there's probably a half or a third of that worth of DAI created that could be making interest for users pretty much.
It could. I mean, that could be a risk for this protocol going forward in general. Is that Maker could just pivot its code to a degree to utilize the same thing. And I guess
Mm,
the main thing to remember about this stablecoin as well is that the mechanism of how it's actually peg is maintained, because everyone probably still remembers Luna collapsing and the USD going to zero. So the peg is maintained through a liquidation process and over collateralization of Ethereum, just like DAI. So if you put $2,000 worth of Ethereum in, you can only mint $1,000 worth of eUSD. And if the
mm,
Ethereum price drops, at some point there's an automatic liquidation point which will sell that Ethereum off to erase that eUSD debt. And so there's also going to be some arbitrage that will go on the liquidity pools, but that's the main mechanism to make sure that the eUSD remains pegged, is that over collateralization and the ability to liquidate people's borrowed positions if needed. So that will maintain the peg, which is very important to understand in how it differs to the likes of UST.
mm. And on their website, it said that you could exchange a couple of different stables for their stable for eUSD. And you just mentioned arbitrage, and I thought that it's kind of interesting because let's say I'm holding UST or whatever stable that they'll take in exchange for eUSD. I'd probably be tempted to trade it and hold this interest-bearing token. But then that means the more I buy eUSD, the more is minted. The more ESD is minted, it becomes how would it affect the price? I think that would probably lower the price a little bit. But then, like you said, that would probably bring in arbitrageurs to try and keep the coin at a stable place. So that would probably increase the transactions and maybe a lot of activity. So it sounds
Absolutely.
pretty, yeah, it sounds really exciting.
Yeah.
And
And the other thing to
do you know
the
how
other thing
long?
to
Yeah.
remember,
Mhm,
the other thing to remember is that you can always trade your eUSD for Ethereum on their uh, website. So $1 of eUSD can always be converted to $1 worth of ETH. So you can
mm,
always back out of your eUSD and get your Ethereum back. So that's a great system. Whereas again, UST and Luna, they were pegged together, and so you were trading out your UST for Luna, whereas this one you're getting Ethereum back out into your Ethereum.
mm. And there's always the opportunity to go long on Ethereum by depositing your Ethereum on Libra, getting eUSD, converting that a couple of times in a loop and holding a little bit more Ethereum than you started out with, but also gaining extra interest. Obviously, that's pretty risky, but there's probably quite a good chunk of the market that does that with the DAI, especially during bull markets. It sounds like a really interesting thing to do.
Yeah, you can absolutely do that, and that's the looping mechanism where you're borrowing and then converting back and then redepositing more collateral and borrowing against it. But yeah, there's a lot of risk that plays when you do that. But with this, if you don't want to take that much risk, you can simply just convert your USDC into eUSD and earn the yield from it without even
Mm,
participating in the function of the protocol. You don't have to deposit ETH to be part of the protocol. And I think that's probably one of its strongest points, is that there's at some point in time there's going to be a lot of people holding stable coins who don't want to do all the other DeFi, degen kind of activities and just want to earn that kind of easy interest bearing yield. Like that's the real
mm,
selling point for this.
mm. And I do like the simplicity. I mean, the protocol is a little bit new from what I understand, so there's probably it probably needs to go through like the gauntlet of bull and bear markets. Hackers probably need to get into it and try to break it. But then at some point, it would sound like the stable of preference to hold. I honestly, outside of risks, I really would want to hold this. But then, speaking of risks, what should we consider as users? How safe is this? Um, how safe is this protocol, do you think?
Yeah, well, just like every protocol that's out there, there's obviously smart contract risk, and they're layering on smart contract risk to a degree here because you've got Lybra smart contract risk, but they are then using Lido Finance. So you've got to, doubling up your risk there by using two protocols. Lido Finance is obviously being battle tested. So I would probably suggest that risk is quite low, but Libra's smart contracts there has been audited. So that is a good
Mm,
sign of a protocol that's out there trying to do good things. Uh, I guess the other thing to think about is that for this to succeed, just like any other project, it needs to reach a critical mass of liquidity. Like the idea
mm,
of wanting to hold eUSD is great, but if not enough people get there fast enough, then
mm,
the protocol kind of falls on itself. We need to have people wanting it more and more and more, and to the potential of the Aves of the world starting to use it as collateral as well. So it keeps that kind of snowball effect. Otherwise, people won't do it. But even if it fails, I guess the good thing is that you can always go back the other way. You can always trade your eUSD back to your Ethereum and move on if the critical mass never gets there. So I think that's two biggest risks really is just it not being adopted
mm,
and the usual smart contract risk. So kind of low risks in the grand scheme of
mm.
crypto at the moment, I think.
Oh yeah, I mean, I feel like the risks that you just mentioned are fairly standard for any new protocol. There's always a smart contract risk, even for all protocols. And then adoption, I mean, it's an uphill climb for most projects. Some projects just start and they get super lucky and their TVL goes up. But I guess this project is kind of nice because it has been around for too long, and I think they've really got a TVL of $10 million, which isn't too bad for. I don't even know if it's been around for more than a month. So I guess we just need to see whether it grows, right? But then,
Yeah, and
speaking of,
you are right. You are right.
mm,
It's only been a month, and to jump to $10 million TVL is pretty decent for a new protocol.
mm. But then, speaking of growth, what are the tokenomics, and are there incentive mechanisms to get it to grow? How does that look like? Is it? It sounds like a really interesting protocol to use, but then how does the tokenomics and the investment perspective look like?
Yeah, and that's what makes this protocol great is that it's got a really great use case for people to just use it without needing the token. And on top of that, it does have a token, which does have some merit and value to it. So it is a DAO. Everything's a DAO, but this one is a
Mm,
DAO that is generating fees from using the protocol. They've also, what I quite liked is that when I looked at the tokenomics, their percentage of token that went to the team and their advisors is actually relatively modest. I think
mm,
13.5% went to the team and their advisors. The rest of it is mainly going to the mining program to obviously incentivize people to go and mint more eUSD. So that I think is a pretty fair starting point, really. With the team really are invested to obviously see this to a big height because they haven't got a huge amount of tokens and they're less incentivized to dump at any time soon when they don't have that much volume. So I think that's
mm,
really cool. And so you can do multiple things with the LBR token. You can obviously just stake it and then you can earn protocol fees and participate in the DAO. And while the mining program is still going, you can obviously use eUSD and USDC and go into liquidity pools to earn more LBR. So that's just the mining incentivizations. So tokenomics wise, it's really cool. Protocol wise, it's really cool because people will want to use it without needing to use the token as well, which I think is a really
mm.
good winner.
So there's reasons to hold the token for governance. There's reasons to stake it, and when you're staking, I think you do earn a little bit as well from the protocol. So that sounds really cool. Sounds like definitely sounds like a good protocol to watch.
Yeah, I
Mm,
think you're right, Will. I think it's definitely a good protocol to watch. I think it's at a very small market cap right now, so it's super risky. It's got a lot of way to go, but I just love the idea of it. Using ETH proof of stake issuance to create a stable coin to earn yield just by holding the stable coin. I think it's kind of something that the Lego blocks of Ethereum, the Lego blocks that are being built of DeFi, really needs in this space. Simplicity.
mm. Yeah, and it sounds like there's probably a couple of interesting ways it could grow, even just as a governance token. There's probably ways in which the governance itself would create demand because ETH is not the only stakeable token that can provide yield. this I can see this stablecoin probably expanding to other tokens that provide yield. And one way that would make the governance interesting is for people to vote in which tokens they want to become part of the collateral, and that could create some interesting demand just for governance, I think. And so, definitely something interesting to watch. And probably say it's one of the more interesting projects that we've looked at.
I definitely would agree. This is just a really interesting project with a really good future case.
Mm,
So, yeah, I'd recommend a lot of people go and have a look at it.
amazing. Definitely something to watch. Definitely something to watch and maybe even try out. All right. Thank you, Simon. Until next time.
Thanks, Will.